Let's jump right into things by going into our accounting application. The accounting application will bring you directly to your accounting dashboard, and this dashboard is an overview of some of your favorite journals. As you can see in our search bar, there's a default filter for our favorites. If we remove this filter, we'll see a complete list of all of our journals. We have our customer invoices, vendor bills, miscellaneous operation, inventory valuation, exchange difference, bank, point of sale, cash-based taxes, and cash. You'll also see this banner for brand new databases. This is prompting us to configure our accounting periods, our chart of accounts, our taxes, as well as set up our bank and credit card accounts. So the first thing we'll do is go into configurations and go to settings. What you want to look at right here is our fiscal location. Currently, we have the fiscal location for the United States, and this course is going to focus on United States accounting. If you have another country that you need to install for a localization, you can click into install more packages, and you can see a complete list of all of the accounting localizations we currently support. Now we're going to go back to settings, and we're going to quickly look through some of the default settings and what we need to configure in our database. So the first subheader here is taxes. We have some default taxes. Right now, Odoo automatically creates the sales and purchase tax that will be applied to all of your products as a 15% tax. We can remove this and have no default, but we'll get into more details about taxes. We have our rounding method. So whether we want to have our taxes round per line or round globally, and this will create a small change in the total taxes. So if you round per line, we're going to take the sum of that line and multiply out the taxes. If you round globally, we're going to sum all of your totals and then calculate the tax based on that total. How often do you do your tax returns? We have our period set at monthly right now, but you can do quarterly, annually, and some others in between that are less common. We're going to have all of our tax operations hit our miscellaneous journal. You can change this journal if you'd like. We usually leave it as miscellaneous operation. There's also a button here to configure your tax accounts. If we click that button, we'll be brought right into our 15% tax group and our tax account, as well as our receivable account, so our payable and receivable account. Next, we have an option for Tax Cloud. This automatically computes taxes in the US. I'm going to deselect that. We will not be covering Tax Cloud. We will touch base on accounting software later on in the video. We have our rounding method, as we mentioned before, cash basis, which we will not be covering either. Next, we have our currencies. We will be covering multiple currencies, but for now, we're going to keep our currency as the USD. If you wanted to enable more currencies, you can click on currencies. First, let's save our database settings. Allow that to refresh for a second. And we'll scroll back down and we'll click currencies. You see all of the supported currencies. Odoo allows us to automatically calculate the exchange rate in real time using APIs from several different softwares. We will cover different exchange rates and how that all is configured out of the box. Next, we have our customer invoices. We can print, send email, or send by post. We will focus on printing and sending emails. We can also send by post, snail mail here. We will not be covering that, so I will deselect snail mail, as this requires credits to use. This is just for a visual if we want to include subtotals on our taxes. So the subtotal taxes displayed on our reports for our invoices. Next, we have our cash rounding, how small of currency we want to measure in. So if we have items that are fractions of pennies, we can select our cash rounding and edit and adjust as needed. Under our subheader for customer payments, we have invoice online payments. So this will allow us to collect payments from our customer online. We have batch payments. This will allow us to group payments together, such as when we're grouping a deposit that's going into the bank, let's say several checks and cash, and we're going to see one line item on our bank statement, we can group those payments together. That way we can reconcile rather easily. We do not need to worry about SEPA or QR codes, as these are not relevant for the United States at the moment, specifically QR codes. We have vendor bills. We have the ability to digitalize vendor bills, and Odoo will automatically create our vendor bills and our lines based on artificial intelligence. Again, this requires credit, so we will not be covering that. Next, we have vendor payments. Odoo allows us to generate checks, and we will be covering checks. We have 3 different options right now for your check layout. If your company does not necessarily have these check layouts, and maybe you have a different paper format, I highly suggest that you change your paper instead of trying to edit any of these reports, because it's going to be cheaper as far as time and money goes to just change your paper. We can set the margins easily right here, check top margin, left margin, and then we can also select whether we want to print multiple checks per page. Next, we have our outstanding receipts and outstanding payments account. These accounts are comparable to other softwares on deposited funds. So any outstanding receipts, so anything that we need to receive and have yet to receive and reconciled in our bank account will hit our outstanding receipts. And the same thing is true for payments. So anytime we make a payment to a vendor, but we have yet to reconcile this in our account, in our bank account journal, it will sit in outstanding payments. We also have our liquidity transfer account. This allows us to transfer money from one bank account to the next, essentially creating internal transfers. And liquidity transfer account will act as the intermediary account between the two. We also have this Anglo-Saxon accounting, which we will have selected for the United States. So we record our cost of goods sold in your journal entries when you confirm an invoice. For our fiscal periods here, we can set the last day of our fiscal period. We can set our fiscal years. We're going to leave this as the default, as it's the most common for most businesses, but let's say you have a new business and you're not going to file taxes, or your accounting year is longer or shorter or different than the calendar year, you would use your fiscal year and your last day to set all of your periods right here. This invoicing switch threshold essentially tells the system to ignore in your financial reports any transactions before the date that you set here. And this is important because if you're using the system for other items, or your accounting software is not quite set up and you're going to set it up at a later date, or maybe you were testing and got something wrong and you want to clear that all out, you can set the invoicing switch threshold to essentially ignore all of the data that happened prior. Under analytics, we have some settings about analytic accounting, analytic tags, margin analysis, and budget management. We'll cover this in more detail, but essentially allows us to track our costs more precisely by recording and tagging purchases and sales into buckets that allow us to know exactly what we're spending our money on. For reporting, we have one general setting down here that allows us to add subtotals. So when we break our reports into sections, or invoices into sections, when this is ticked, the totals and subtotals will appear below the sections on that report. And of course, we'll cover all this in more detail. I just wanted you to get a general overview of some of the default settings in Odoo.